let's talk a little bit about the GOP tax scam. Boost, right? Obviously we're all aware that it's legislation that will cut billions from Medicare and Medicaid, kick 13 million people off of health insurance. Boo. It'll raise the taxes on millions of people and middle-class families. Some call it the Donor Relief Act, which is, isn't that funny? Because the tax cuts, as we know, are going to large corporations. They're going to the 1%, basically Republican donors, while they blow up the deficit and the national debt. So they call it the Donor Relief Act. Yeah, boo, right, that's bad. That's bad. So, and maybe a little bit about our hosts too. Most of you are familiar with Action Together. They're a grassroots organization. Let's hear it for Action Together. Woo! Okay, they are a grassroots organization that's dedicated to community action, to political advocacy, and to real progress. They connect Northeast Pennsylvania counties that are eager to continue the fight, to continue the good fight, because they know that we are stronger together. So let's have another hand for Action Together. Okay, since he was elected to the United States Senate in 2006, Bob Casey has worked to create family-sustaining jobs, to foster financial security for Pennsylvania families, protect our children and invest in their futures, to ensure safety at home and respect for America abroad, promote honesty and accountability in government, not an easy thing to do these days, preserve the dignity of basically the vulnerable of all ages, and advocate for his constituency and to help them solve the problems that they face every day. Senator Casey is no stranger to Action Together. He and his staff have taken the time to get to know the organization by attending functions, hosting meetings, and even telling the story of one of our members on the Senate floor. Let's hear it. He takes the time, and so does his staff, to actually meet with his constituents, even when they disagree, right? Okay? And this is happening at a time where we can't even get our foot in the door of some of our representatives. We know what that's like, right? That's right. So please join me in welcoming Senator Bob Casey.
Hey, let's hear it for Dwayne. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're welcoming me that way, but this event today is really focused on a tax bill which is going to be bad for so many of our neighbors and our friends here in Lackawanna County, northeastern Pennsylvania, and across our Commonwealth, and indeed across the country. It's real simple, even though it's a very complicated bill. This is simply a giveaway to the super rich and a giveaway to big corporations. That's what this bill is all about. And we could go through chapter and verse of it, but that's where they were going from the beginning, right? We know, that might have been one of them, one of those Republicans in Washington. Look, they tried this in the health care bill. We shouldn't be surprised. Remember months ago when we were fighting to uphold the right of people to have health care? We were fighting to preserve the Medicaid program for our kids and our seniors and people with disabilities when they tried to decimate that program. In the same bills, the bill that Congressman Cartwright was fighting against in the House, they tried to give a tax cut to the very wealthy in the health care bill. Why should we be at all surprised that when they come up with a tax bill, there's going to be a big giveaway to the super rich? Let me tell you where we've been. Since 1980, not everyone here was born by 1980, but I remember 1980 when Ronald Reagan was running for president. And we were told that if you give the super rich a lot of money, everyone else is going to do better. It was called trickle down. If you had a Dixie cup in your hand waiting for that trickle down, it wouldn't be filled in all these years because it doesn't work. We know that. What happened since 1980? What happened to that poor, struggling group of Americans called the top 1%? Their share, the share of the top 1%, their share of national income doubled since 1980. In 1980, they had about 11% of all of national income. Now it's 20% of national income. And when you measure it by wealth, as the New York Times did this morning, it's about 40%. So the top 1% is doing quite well. That's why I said, and a lot of Republicans even said this, quietly, but some of them did, that the top 1% doesn't need more. We need more middle-class tax cuts, more tax cuts for people struggling to get into the middle class, but they don't do that in this bill. So that's the main point, that this bill is a giveaway to people at the top, whether they're running a big corporation and therefore benefiting personally, or whether they're very rich to begin with. The second thing, let them eat something, right? The second thing I want to say is this was an opportunity. We do major reforms to the tax code very rarely. The last time we did it was 31 years ago, right? So this was an opportunity not only to help the middle class and those trying to get into the middle class and not worry about the top 1% because they've got all they need and big corporations have never done better. This was an opportunity to help families and especially to help children. Now you saw the little debate at the very end about one or two Republican senators talking about the child tax credit. Even if they got their way, which they didn't, even if they got their way, it wouldn't have been good enough, in my judgment, to help our kids. One of the best ways to get children out of poverty is to do more on the child tax credit, which Republicans refuse to do in a substantial way. Yeah, they made it a little better for some, but if you're low income, it's not doing much for you. And it would also help if they could enhance the earned income tax credit. That would have been good for those families. But see, Republicans in Washington don't care about that because they're too busy taking care of the top. And when you give the wealthy a big tax cut, and then on top of that you give an even bigger tax cut to big corporations, well over $1 trillion there, there's no money left. There's no money left for the middle. There's no money left for those trying to get to the middle. And there's certainly not enough money to lift millions of children out of poverty, which we could have done with this bill. But what do Republicans do? They did the same thing they always do. Give away to the rich, worry all night about corporations instead of worrying about families. So I'll tell you something. We know what it's like to struggle in this county. This county and this region has had tough economic times over my lifetime and long before I was born. So we know, our families here know what it's like to struggle and to worry about paying the bills. And I thought Republicans by now in Washington would have done more to worry about those families that struggle. But they're worried about the people at the top. And a long time ago, hundreds of years ago, St. Augustine said, "Without justice, what are kingdoms but great bands of robbers?" This bill robs people. Some might say, oh, well, there may be some people in the middle class that might get a tax cut. And that's true, some of them will. But you know what? They had an opportunity, we had an opportunity to do a lot more for those in the middle. Because when you give so much away to the top, and you give so much away to corporations, there's not enough left for a sizable, substantial, unprecedented middle-class tax cut. So yes, the middle class was robbed because this could have been a lot better for them. Children were robbed in this bill because we could have helped them a lot more in this legislation. And I believe that America is going to be robbed of an opportunity to move all of our families into the future. I don't think the middle class, or I don't think the top 1%, the wealthiest Americans, people making more than $730,000 a year, I don't think they should get one penny in this, but they're getting a lot more than that. They're getting more in the first year.
Not one penny.
Right. That's a good sign. So look, I've talked long enough already. I want to thank you for being here and for fighting this battle just like you did on health care, just like you did on those budget cuts. And you know what we got to fight next? Win or lose this fight, and we still have a shot to win it, but win or lose on this fight, guess what they're going to come at next time? So Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. When you hear a Republican in Washington talk about, quote, entitlement reform, they're coming for us. They're coming for our families when it comes to Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. We're going to fight them on that to the end of the earth. Thank you very much.
This is Matthew. He's the one that you got to tell his story on the
How are you? We
Senate
haven't
floor.
met. How are you?
What do you want to say to him? This is Isabella, his sister.
Good to see you. Thanks so much.
Say thank you.
Can we have another hand for Senator Bob Casey? Right? That's what real representation looks like, right? Thank you. Yes, thank you. So, you know, this was put together by Action Together. And if we don't do an action together, I don't know why we are here. So I'd like everyone at this moment to take out their cell phones. There's something we can do. And so what I'm going to have you do is text the word protect to a certain number. And when you do that, you'll actually be entered into a quick response system so that we can get out in a moment's notice for things that are important, like our families, right? Like healthcare, like our children. So what I'd like for you to do is text the word protect to 787-753. That's 787-753, and text the word protect to that, and you'll get an immediate response that says that you're logged in, and you'll hear about these kind of events that are coming up. You got it? All right. Who has it? Hold up your phone. All right, good. That's great. So we are Action Together, and we can do things together. That's what community involvement is all about. So thank you. Thank you. All right. So, for those of you who may not have heard of Little Lobbyists, they're a parent-run organization that seeks to protect and expand the rights of children with complex medical needs through advocacy, education, and outreach. They want to ensure that all children with complex medical needs have access to the health care, education, and community inclusion that they need to thrive. The Little Lobbyists are basically families who share stories from across the country with members of Congress. Jackson Corbin is a 12-year-old from Hanover, Pennsylvania. He and his brother Henry have Noonan's syndrome. They both have been traveling to Harrisburg and to Washington, D.C. since the beginning of the year to fight for Medicaid. Jackson and Henry joined Little Lobbyists in July, and their mom, Anna, serves as a Little Lobbyist on the Little Lobbyist Board of Directors, and also serves as a Director of Community Engagement. Jackson is here today to tell his story. As one of the older children in Little Lobbyists, Jackson has been using his voice to speak to his friends about himself and his little brother. Can we have a warm Scranton welcome? Here you go, Jackson.
All the way down there. Go Jackson! Go Jackson!
Move this down a little bit. There you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Jackson Corbin and I am 12 years old. Yesterday was my dad's birthday and he took me and my brother Henry to see Star Wars: The Last Jedi to celebrate. Now I promise I won't share any spoilers, but watching the movie made me think that not much is different now than it was a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. An evil empire, a corrupt senate, oppressed citizens, and the resistance. It's a little scary to me though, because this isn't a movie, it's real life. My brother Henry and I have Noonan syndrome, which means we have a lot of health issues and we spend a lot of time going to the doctor. Because we have complex medical needs, we both qualify for Medicaid here in Pennsylvania. Before we started receiving Medicaid, our family struggled. My mom always says that Medicaid saved us. In the beginning of the year, we heard that the government was going to start making cuts to Medicaid and try to repeal the ACA, which protects kids like us who have pre-existing conditions. Me and Henry have been going to Capitol Hill with our mom since March, fighting for health care. In July, we teamed up with the Little Lobbyists to help them fight too. We visit members of Congress to tell them stories of children with complex medical needs. I've been to all 100 Senate offices and met 23 senators. I know what you're thinking. What do kids know about this stuff? Why should members of Congress listen to children? Well, I watch the news, I see what's happening, and I'm old enough to know right from wrong. It was wrong when the president made fun of people, or a person with disabilities. It was wrong when Senator Toomey compared people with pre-existing conditions to burn down houses. It was wrong when Representative Ryan said he has been dreaming about cutting Medicaid. I want to fight for what is right. I want to fight for kids like me and Henry. Our voices matter. We might be kids, but we're still Americans. When we hear our members talk about repealing the ACA or cutting Medicaid, they're threatening our lives, our liberty, and our pursuit of happiness. We deserve the chance to be healthy, to grow up, and to lead this country one day. These laws affect our future. I hope that all the senators whose offices we have visited remember us and won't let the tax bill be passed. I hope they understand that tax cuts mean cuts to important programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Well, at least I hope they understand it. I'm 12 and I understand it. I'm grateful to the senators who have spent the past year working against those who want to take our care away. I especially want to thank Senator Bob Casey. He told me a few months ago, keep going, keep telling your story, and I will never forget that. I promise Senator Casey, no matter how long it takes, I will keep fighting. Thank you for letting me speak today. Please keep calling and visiting your members of Congress. Ask them to destroy the Death Star. I mean, the tax bill. Thank you, and may the force be with you.
Wasn't that amazing? Can we have another hand for the little lobbyist? Let's have another hand for that little lobbyist, huh? Thank you, Jackson. Thank you, Anna. So, during his time in Congress, Matt Cartwright has stepped forward as a leader, serving as a regional whip, introducing dozens of pieces of legislation aimed at helping seniors, military families, veterans, students, workers, consumers, and the middle class and the environment. Most of those have been introduced with bipartisan support. That's not something that's easy to do these days, right? So, Congressman Cartwright and his staff have participated in numerous Action Together events. He and his staff met with members, and we even have representation on his local healthcare roundtable. This is what real representation looks like in northeastern Pennsylvania and the Lehigh Valley. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Cartwright.
Thanks, Dwayne. Hey, how about, let's hear it for Dwayne Heisler right here. What a great guy. And Jackson and Henry Corbin. Talk about great advocates for what we really need here in this country. But you know, we're facing a time when something has clearly died in Washington, and it's bipartisanship. You know, I walked over here. We have a monument. It's right there, and it's got some prominent local Republicans on there. Governor Scranton, Congressman McDade. These are people that worked with Democrats. It's why they got elected around here. It's why they were effective. Bob Casey and I, we like working with Republicans, but this tax bill, it was cooked up in the absence of any input from Democrats. That's just wrong. And it's not smart either, because if you want to do lasting change, if you want to make lasting repair to the tax code, you do it working across the aisle. And you know, the last time Senator Casey mentioned it was 1986. And Congressman McDade was in office at the time, and there was tax reform in 1986. And you remember who did it? It was President Reagan working across the aisle with Tip O'Neill. You know, Tip and the Gipper. They fought like cats and dogs all day long, but they made up and they made lasting tax reform, and that's the last time it happened. And God knows we need tax reform in this country. Our tax code is loaded with special exemptions and special privileges and exceptions and loopholes. It's just loaded with these things that are worked into the tax code by the lobbyists and the special interests that aren't really looking out for you and me and the middle class, are they? No. So we have an awful lot of work we ought to do to work on our tax code, and there are good people on both sides of the aisle that want to do it. This is not happening right now. And my lament to all of you is that we could be doing it and we're not. We could be having hearings about what ought to be fixed with the tax code and how things got in there that kind of got slipped in when nobody was paying attention. We could be having hearings talking about the effects of the proposed changes to the tax code that are in this tax bill that's going through. But we're not. We could be hearing from experts talking about what the future is going to be like under the proposed tax changes. But we're not. We didn't have one single hearing. All we had was committee markups where Democrats tried to introduce amendments to the tax bill on the Ways and Means Committee, and they weren't accepted. None of them. Which is a ridiculous way to make law, isn't it? Yes. And Senator Casey mentioned, you know, the middle class is getting a tiny bit of relief. And about 30% of them are going to see their taxes go up in the middle class. So some are getting no relief at all. The rest are getting a modest amount of relief. But most of the relief is going to places that don't need it. And I want to talk to you about changing the corporate tax rate. The corporate tax rate is going to go from 35%, it looks like, down to 21%. We're not sure until the very last minute because they don't bother telling Democrats about these things. And we read about it in the newspaper as quick as you do. But when you reduce it from 35% down to 21%, you're just about cutting the corporate tax rate in half. And so this is an enormous amount of money. And one thing you want to ask is, well, where's it going? Is it going to be instantly transferred into creating new jobs? No, they already have their plans. And you know, when you're a big corporation, big multinational corporation, it takes a lot of planning. You know, 5-year plans are what they think in terms of. So when there's a sudden influx of tax money that you didn't have to pay, where's it go? It goes out in the form of dividends to the owners of the corporations, or if they buy back their own stock, then the value of those shares that are owned by the owners of the corporations goes up correspondingly. Well, who are the owners of these corporations? How many people, raise your hand, have you ever heard people complaining about the amount of American economic aid that goes overseas? You've heard that. People grouse about it. Why they should be helping this group or that group or the other group, but we're sending it overseas. What a waste of money. Well, we spend something like, $30 billion a year in economic aid to countries that really need it. War-torn places filled with refugees. This is money that builds up American prestige abroad. It's money well spent. But when we do something like this, give something like a $500 billion tax break to multinational corporations, when you know about 20% of the shares of these American multinational corporations are owned abroad. Foreign nationals. And these are not economically depressed areas. This is not the people who really need it. We're talking about Saudi princes, folks. We're talking about $100 billion or so in easy tax, American tax money getting exported to foreign nationals who are already rich. Does that sound like a good idea to you? No, we have a lot better ways to spend that money. And you know what's going to happen? We've seen this game before. Senator Casey's seen it a lot longer than I have, but I've seen it too. And here's what happens. When it comes to doing things that actually help real Americans, people in need, people like Jackson and Henry, when the word goes around that we want to have a bill to help people like this and research medical care and cures for diseases, what do we hear from the other side? Oh, there's no money for that. There's no money for that. And all of a sudden, after this sudden spasm of a spending spree in the form of a tax cut for people that don't really need it, all of a sudden there's no money and everybody's a deficit hawk all of a sudden. So it's a terrible situation. This is a bad bill. It was done in the dark of night without any bipartisan support. And the problem with doing it that way is it doesn't last. I mean, people are going to, as soon as the Democrats get back in power, they're going to want to change it again. If we want to have lasting tax reform, it has to be tax reform that makes sense for regular middle-class Americans, yes, for the country at large. Yes. It has to be tax reform that is done on a bipartisan basis, so it has a lot of support and it'll stay in place so that business people going forward can plan with certainty about what their tax burden is expected to be. Senator Casey and I are in staunch support of small business, in staunch support of the middle class, and these are groups that are not being helped enough with this tax bill. It's these multinational corporations that are being helped, a large percentage of which are just foreign nationals with no American loyalty, and this is not the American middle class we're talking about. And there's one final point I want to talk about. We here in northeastern Pennsylvania, we know what it is to have bad trade deals go through. And bad trade deals hurt the American manufacturing base. I gave a floor speech a couple of weeks ago about when Thompson Consumer Electronics folded up. And it folded up and they tried to move it to Mexico. And in fact, it didn't work out in Mexico. They figured out that the people that really knew how to build picture tubes lived right here in Scranton and Dunmore. It didn't work out. And we have talked about the effect of bad trade deals, and a lot of politicians all over the lot have done that. And I'm here to tell you that this tax bill really hurts the trade deficit, the exporting of jobs. And here's how it happens. There's a territorial difference in how the corporations are going to be taxed under this bill. If you haven't been paying attention, it's there. Now, you know, Democrats, we're okay with reducing the corporate tax rate a little bit. President Obama wanted to bring it down to 28 from 35, and we're all in favor of helping American companies compete better abroad. That's fine. But under this tax bill, it goes from 35 to 21 here in America. So if you're a multinational corporation and you're making a profit in America, you pay 21%. And under this bill, if you're a multinational corporation making money overseas, guess what? It's going to go down to 15%. So if you're the decision maker for an American multinational corporation and you want to open up a new manufacturing plant and you want to return as much of investment as you can and a profit to your shareholders, where do you open it up? Do you open it up in northeastern Pennsylvania? No, you don't. Do you open it up anywhere in America? No, you don't. You ship it overseas. This is an outsourcing of American manufacturing jobs in this tax bill. It's an outrage. And we here in northeastern Pennsylvania, we don't like that one bit, do we? No. Because the plan is we ought to be building up American manufacturing. We ought to be creating more family-sustaining manufacturing jobs here in the United States. And that is a principal objection that I have to this tax bill, because it's doing the opposite of all of us, what all of us want and what all of us need, not only here in northeastern Pennsylvania, but in the United States. So I'm here to say thank you for raising your voices against this dumb tax bill. And keep it going. Keep it going. Thanks very much, everybody.
Can we have another hand for Congressman Cartwright? That's what real representation looks like, right? We know that Congressman Cartwright has our backs, right? Yep, he's looking out for us here, and that's more of what we need. So, with that being said, our next speaker, Judy Herschel, is a wife of a small business owner and a career mom to 2 young boys from Susquehanna Depot. She has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in anthropology and is certified through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as a drug and alcohol counselor with 18 years of experience. She is a community advocate for justice, and her family lineage reaches back 7 generations in Susquehanna County. Judy is running for U.S. Congress in the 10th Congressional District. Judy, yes, and she's doing that for her children and the future of all of our children. Can we welcome Judy Herschel?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you, Dwayne, very much, and thank you, Marley, and Action Together. Senator Casey and Congressman Cartwright are very strong voices for the people of Pennsylvania, and it's extremely encouraging to see them fighting for us against this awful tax bill. My name is Judy Herschel, and I hope to join them in fighting for Pennsylvanians by winning the 10th District in 2018. Since launching my campaign in July, I have spoken to many people in every county throughout the 10th District, and I have been to all 15 of them. Republicans and Democrats, we are united in our concerns in 4 key areas: healthcare, jobs, education, and the impact of the opioid crisis. This tax bill will have a negative effect on all of these issues. Despite the empty and false promises that our current administration is peddling, this bill is misguided, it's bad for the economy, and it's bad for the people that are living, working, and raising a family here in Pennsylvania. In fact, millions of struggling and working families will have a tax increase, and for those that don't, will get a temporary tax break. Not one struggling or working class family in this country should get any tax increase. We are struggling enough. So I want you to take a look at the person on your left, and then take a look at the person on your right. And I want you to ask your neighbor who can afford to pay more in taxes to ensure that the richest Americans can enjoy a tax break that they do not need. And no one. And who's going to foot the bill for helping the top 1%? Yep. Regular working Pennsylvanians like myself and many of you who are working very, very hard and already juggling how to provide for our families and for a better future. A better future for our community that includes access to affordable quality health care, steady, well-paying jobs, modern, good education for our children, and actual solutions to the opioid crisis. This tax bill does absolutely nothing to make any of these issues more attainable. The promise of new good-paying jobs as a result of these very large, massive tax cuts to big corporations is a downright lie. Yes, it is. Trickle-down economics does not work. With health care, repealing the individual mandate is the beginning of the end for the Affordable Care Act. We will see our premiums skyrocket, making medical bankruptcies a real threat to many families. 13 million people will lose their coverage, and there will be massive cuts to Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare. And this will have devastating consequences on our seniors, our veterans, individuals with disabilities, people who are receiving treatment for substance abuse and mental health disorders, and our children. Now is a time that we must focus on, and Washington focus on, the things that are important to us, like preserving net neutrality and funding the CHIP program. Some of our most vulnerable citizens, 9 million children, will lose their access to health care by the dismantling of the CHIP program. I was recently speaking with a mother whose son has severe asthma and receives his treatment and his medication through the CHIP program. Without the CHIP program, he will be critically ill. He will be in and out of the hospital. He needs CHIP. And so do the other children that rely on this bipartisan program. And let's be clear, we need to continue to speak up so that Washington knows that we do not approve of this, and we do not approve of this tax bill. And we should kill the bill. Kill the bill. Kill the bill. Kill the bill. And we should honor our fellow Americans in Alabama and hold off on a vote until Doug Jones arrives on the Senate floor. This tax bill is bad policy compounded by bad politics. It was rushed through the dead of the night through the Senate without a single public hearing. Our representatives had less input than special interests, big donors, and the lobbyists that are lining the pockets of our current administration. You see, our current administration sold the future of our children that night to the tune of more than $1 trillion. These tax cuts will be paid for by our children, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren. These tax cuts will be paid for by cuts to Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare. And its impact will be felt for very long and very hard. Washington, we need people in Washington that will listen to their constituents, that will fight for what they believe in and for what is right. We need people who will stand by the working class and against special interests. We need people who will fight for justice, equality, and fairness, like Bob Casey and Matt Cartwright. And I will too. I will too. We must continue to resist. We must continue to rally. We must march. And we must continue to fight for what we believe in. And more importantly, we must take back the House and the Senate in 2018. My name is Judy Herschel, and I am proud to run for U.S. Congress in the 10th District of Pennsylvania and take the voice of the people to Washington, D.C. Thank you very much.
Could we have another hand for Judy Herschel? Hey, does anyone know, can you tell me what democracy looks like? Tell me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Tell me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Tell me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Tell me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
All right, give yourselves a hand for coming out here today. You know, the ultimate protest is a vote. And we need to make sure that people get out there and vote, like Judy said, because we need to turn this around. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you.